Ze Kitchen Galerie is a long-standing and beloved Michelin-starred restaurant in Paris. The establishment is also one of the most affordable Michelin-starred restaurants in the city. They feature a 7-course tasting menu for 125 euros, and I just had to try it.
Today, I am clearly not in Paris, France. Rather, I'm back home at Washington Square Park in New York City. The thing is, I never got to film a sort of introduction and conclusion to my experience at Ze Kitchen Galerie. With my trip to Paris, I obviously wanted to go to some good restaurants, especially a couple of Michelin-starred restaurants. Unfortunately, before my trip, I didn't really get the chance to do any proper research regarding Michelin-starred restaurants. You see, when I went to Tokyo, I literally looked up every single Michelin-starred restaurant. I made a huge list. I compared them all to find out which places would be best for me. As a result, I discovered Ze Kitchen Galerie with a simple Google search. I pretty much just looked up the most affordable Michelin-starred restaurants in Paris, and Ze Kitchen Galerie came right up. Of course, there were other options, but Ze Kitchen Galerie seemed to have a good price, the location worked for me, and it's been in business for a while, which is a good sign. So I made a reservation and had a pretty good meal. Now, it wasn't perfect, there were some issues, but it was still a pretty good meal nevertheless. So with that being said, this was my meal at Ze Kitchen Galerie.
Ze Kitchen Galerie is located in the 6th arrondissement of Paris along a narrow street right off the Seine. It was in 2001 that the restaurant opened their doors. Ze Kitchen Galerie is the product of chef William Ledeuil, who learned from and worked for the culinary legend Guy Savoy. It was in 2008 that the establishment earned its Michelin Star. Ze Kitchen Galerie has also received solid reviews from Go and Mio. While I was tired and wasn't feeling the best, I was still very excited for my dinner. Just the thought of having a meal always improves my spirit. I arrived at the Kitchen Galerie right when it opened at 7:15 for my reservation. After checking in, I was soon seated and was able to take in the space. Ze Kitchen Galerie is a nice looking restaurant, and the gallery name certainly fits the bill as colorful contemporary artwork adorns the walls. The space is brightly lit and has a modern feel to it, but there's still a comforting sense of warmth. Overall, I thought that Ze Kitchen had a nice atmosphere. Once I was settled, I began to look over the menu. For dinner, there's pretty much only 2 options. There's a 5-course tasting menu for 105 euros and a 7-course tasting menu for 125. I, along with what seemed like most of the dining room, went with the 7-course selection. Lunch is even more affordable, where a 3-course meal will set one back 49 euros, a true bargain for a Michelin-starred restaurant. In terms of beverages, there's a modest list of wine. I decided to go with my server's suggestion by ordering a glass of the 2023 Fontaine Goubi Chablis. The wine wasn't bad. It had a good thick body to it and would prove to be an adequate pairing with a number of the courses that I was about to try. However, that Chablis wasn't the only beverage on my table. When I was asked if I would prefer still or sparkling water, I requested still, and a fancy bottle of it was the result. Tap water would have been fine, and I'm not a fan of spending extra on bottled water, but that was at least very good water, not that I really cared. With my beverages in hand, it was now truly time for the meal to begin. First up wasn't an official course, but rather 2 amuses to kick things off. The first creation I tried was a carrot and fennel soup. Now that was delightful. The soup was nice and frothy, and the flavor was much stronger than I was expecting. After a long day of sightseeing in Paris, that dish really woke me up. Besides the soup was a nice little tart. Unfortunately, I can't recall exactly what it consisted of, but I do remember that I liked it. Next, I was presented with a slice of bread. My server stated that it really wasn't something supposed to be consumed on its own, but rather as something meant to soak up the sauces from the dishes ahead. Soon enough, I was presented with the first official course of the meal. It was a marinated fish with yuzu, wasabi, daikon, and a green curry. That proved to be a fine course, with bold flavors coming from the wasabi, but it didn't overwhelm the fish. In fact, it was a nicely balanced dish. The fish was pleasant as well. Now, I don't believe that I was ever told as to the type of fish it was, but it was certainly suitable for that course. After finishing, it wasn't long until I was presented with the next dish, which was a black tiger shrimp ravioli with peanut red curry and a shellfish Thai broth. The thing about Ze Kitchen Galerie is that it may be a French restaurant, but Chef Ledeuil incorporates a number of Asian flavors into his cooking, which for me resulted in a very interesting menu that was full of surprises. First, I tried the broth, which I loved. It was an absolute explosion of flavor. Then I tried the pasta, which was both wonderful and a bit off. Now, the shrimp within the pasta was wonderful, but the texture of the pasta was unfortunately a miss, particularly around the edges as it was a bit hard and tough. Now, it didn't ruin the dish by any means, but it did lessen what was otherwise a very enjoyable creation. With everything on the plate finished, besides the broth, I put that slice of bread to use, which proved to be a fun and tasty way to soak up that wonderful sauce. Now, even though the bread is really just a mere instrument to gather up the sauce, I felt that it could have been a bit more flavorful on its own. Nevertheless, I still love the idea of using the bread in that way. After the ravioli was another pasta course. It was a malfadine pasta with blue lobster and a seaweed gel. Now that was a course that I was particularly excited about. Flavor-wise, that was a very good dish. I really enjoyed it. The lobster was perfectly cooked, but I can't say the same for the pasta, which was unfortunately underdone. It proved very apparent with the wavy edges of the malfadine, which had just too much chew. Once again, that was a good dish, but it could have been much better. Following the pasta was the fish of the day, which included carrots, oranges, turmeric, and a shellfish juice. Now, I can't recall if I was informed as to the type of fish that was, but it was a great looking plate that I was certainly eager to try. That fish was delicious. It was perfectly cooked and nice and tender. While the fish may have been soft and delicate, the other components on the plate contributed sharp and bold flavors, which I loved. There was a great richness from the shellfish juice, but it was a nice contrast from the other elements of the dish, like the turmeric and orange. Everything was balanced, which equated to my favorite dish of the night so far. I also made sure to utilize the bread to soak up every last molecule of that delicious sauce. Next up was the meat course, consisting of a Segovia suckling pig with damson plum, a shiso condiment, and a papaya ginger harissa vierge. On a separate plate, I was also given a sweet pastry to pair with the dish. I started by trying the pig, and it was delicious. The meat was perfectly cooked and it was very tender. It had a pleasant richness to it, but the sweet flavors on the plate added even more flavorful dimensions. While I was enjoying the pig, I also tried the pastry, which was very good, even though I thought that it was an odd pairing with the dish. It felt like something that I would have for breakfast. Nevertheless, I have nothing to complain about because it was a very tasty creation. Overall, I found that suckling pig along with the previous fish course to be the two best savory dishes of the night. But now it was on to dessert. First up were actually a pair of desserts, but together they made a lot of sense. On those plates were white chocolate, wasabi ice cream, buckwheat, coffee, and whiskey. Yeah, I was surprised too when I heard wasabi ice cream, but I love trying new things. First, I sampled the plate on my left, which featured a wonderful array of sweet and acidic flavors along with a variety of textures. That was a good dish, but it was overshadowed by what was on my right, the wasabi ice cream. To put it simply, that ice cream was remarkable. It was unlike anything that I've ever had before. The tingly wasabi flavor was perfectly balanced. If it was just 1% more intense, it would have been too much. If it was 1% less, it would have been too weak. Combined with the other flavors of the dessert, that translated to a truly top-tier dish that I loved. In fact, wasabi ice cream in some fashion has apparently been on the menu since the restaurant opened. After finishing, it was on to the final dish, which consisted of grape, nuts, vanilla, and a verjus condiment. Now, I wasn't actually sure if I would be getting a final dish, since the last course consisted of basically 2 desserts, and a 7-course tasting menu is a 7-course tasting menu. As a result, I was glad to see that creation, which turned out to be another winner. I loved it because there was such a good variety of not only textures, but temperatures as well, from hot to cool. My meal at Ze Kitchen Galerie certainly ended strong. The service and hospitality of the restaurant was excellent, which really enhanced my experience. The food, for the most part, was delicious and very interesting, but it's a shame about some of the pasta courses because that dinner could have been even better. After finishing, it was time for the bill, which totaled to 152 euros, but with my tip, I spent just under 175 euros. With the exchange rate of that particular day, I spent a total of $201.70.
So that was a pretty good dinner. I certainly had a good time at Ze Kitchen Galerie. Now, unfortunately, I did get sick earlier in my trip, and even though I was on the up and up when I dined at Ze Kitchen Galerie, it still would have been so much better if I actually felt better. That's life, right? It happens. Anyways, I liked all the food I had. There were a lot of surprises with some of the bold flavors inspired from Asian countries. Like I said, I didn't really get to do much research into the restaurant before my meal, so a lot of those Asian flavors were really a pleasant surprise. Especially that wasabi ice cream. That has gotta be the craziest ice cream flavor that I've ever had. But it worked. The only thing was, I just wish that some of those courses were prepared a bit better, like that one pasta dish. The flavors were delicious, but the texture of that pasta, the bit of crunch to it, it just kind of turned me off on that course. The other thing was that I just wish that I felt a bit better, but like I said, that's life. Overall, I really like Ze Kitchen Galerie. I think they offer really good value, and the food they make is very interesting. I mean, the restaurant offers wasabi ice cream. Enough said. Plus, the restaurant has excellent service, a really nice atmosphere. All around, I think it's a good establishment. To sum it up, I had a great meal at Ze Kitchen Galerie, and if I'm back in Paris, that is a restaurant that I would like to return to.